Brian, what is the president talking about? What are you going to do?
Well, we're going to make history today. The president's going to sign this bipartisan infrastructure bill into law. And as you mentioned, presidents of both parties for decades have been talking about getting infrastructure done. And today the president is going to make that happen. And we're going to waste no time in beginning to implement this bill in a way that the American people can see the benefits in their lives. As you mentioned,
Brian,
Mitch Landrieu is joining the administration. We're excited about being able to move out on that.
That's not going to impact the crippling inflation we're feeling right now. What are you going to do about that?
Well, I think that we need to start and take that with some context. If we look back to when the president took office, we were in an outright economic emergency. You and I spoke about it at the time. 18 million people on unemployment insurance, 3,000 people a day dying. You look back to last Thanksgiving, the reason why prices were low was nobody could travel. People weren't able to even spend time with their families in the midst of an unmitigated COVID outbreak. Because of the steps the president's taken, we're now seeing an economic recovery that is the envy of the world. Economic growth in America is growing faster than any other major economy. We've brought the unemployment rate down to 4.6%. That's 2 years faster than most experts projected. So now the question is, how do we go at this issue of prices in a way that actually continues the strength of this recovery?
And
Number one, that means finishing the job on COVID. I want to underscore that the pandemic and the economy are related. And the more that we do, the progress that we make to get 5 to 11-year-olds vaccinated, that gives parents more confidence to get back into the workforce. The more workplaces that we can get COVID-free, the more we can return to a sense of economic normalcy. More people will go out and spend their money at the movies rather than buying a TV at home. That's the kind of rebalancing that we anticipate, the more progress we can make on COVID.
Okay, all of that makes perfect sense. However, why is it that we're not seeing the Fed raise rates and end bond purchases? It doesn't make sense why we are still at the levels we're at. We haven't seen inflation like this since the 90s, and that's when Fed funds rate was above 5%. Why on earth would we still be at zero and buying bonds?
Well, I think you know my answer to that question, which is we have a lot of respect for the independence of the Fed. And so you're not going to hear me or the president. Well, you're not going to hear me or the president pass judgment on the Fed's execution of monetary policy. It's important to maintain the independence there. Our focus is on the steps that we can take right now. And in the very near term, focusing on COVID, also focusing on these supply chain issues. You know, one of the things that I think is important for people to understand is that this economy right now, we're moving more goods through this economy than we ever have in history. The amount of goods that are moving through the economy is up 17% from before the pandemic took place.
But, sir,
and so it's putting some stresses on our supply chains. We're working to try to address that in the very immediate term, working with ports around the country to try to move goods faster. But this infrastructure bill, don't underestimate the impact that this is going to have across our economy, with people now understanding that there is help on the way. There's investment on the way to try to help unstick some of these bottlenecks.
Then do you think raising rates right now and stopping buying bonds would be help on the way? Because right now, as we continue to buy bonds, the only people that helps are investors. And you've got the middle class being absolutely torched for being savers.
Well, again, what I would say is that I'm going to leave the execution of monetary policy to the Fed.
He's going to execute it, but you can have an opinion on it, sir. The country is watching you. You are the economic advisor to the president. You are telling the president, here's what raising rates would do. Here's what it would help. Here's what would hurt. What do you think about raising rates now?
Well, Stephanie, respectfully, one of the things that's important about our economic policy making in this country is giving the Fed the independence to actually act without political interference. That was something that the prior administration run roughshod over, and we don't think that that's the right thing to do. So what we're going to do is give them the space to make those determinations. And at the same time, we're going to focus on things that actually will address some of the issues that you're raising. Take the issue of what is the family's biggest asset, their home. Right now, it's cost too much to find home ownership in America. And one thing that we can do that would make a big difference would be to invest in building more affordable homes around the United States. For a decade, as you know, we have underinvested in building affordable housing, both for rental and for home ownership. This bill that's in front of Congress this week would make that investment now to actually address what will otherwise be rising home prices next year. That's the kind of thing that we could do to actually address some of the issues that you are raising on the fiscal policy side.
Then if this happens, you have said before this is transitory. When do you see this inflationary environment that we're living in, when do you see it improving?
Well, most independent experts look forward to 2022 and see inflation moderating. But I think that the most important question right now is how can we make progress on the elements that we know will help move this recovery forward, moderate prices, bring down prices, but continue the strong wage growth we've seen, continue the strong job growth we're seeing. That's getting COVID under control. That's addressing these supply chain issues and implementing this historic infrastructure bill. And it's also going at the costs that typical Americans face, like housing, like the cost of prescription drugs and health care, and like child care. Those are all steps that we have within our power to take right now. And that's where our focus is. That's where you're going to see us this week working with Congress to try to pass that Build Back Better legislation.